Remember a couple of years ago when everyone was making these tier list videos? Well, I felt kind of left out. So I decided that today I would do a tier list video on something that I'm interested in, which is right now English Bible translations. So without further ado, here we go. I did not make this list, someone else made it. So there are some quirks with it. First of all, there's different versions of the same translation, which I think is kind of funny. Although I do think that, it'll give me an opportunity to talk about that. And then also there are some translations that maybe I wouldn't have put in here because I don't really think that they're like serious options. But let's just get into it and see where it takes us. First of all, we have the King James Version or the authorized version, which, if you see my other videos, you'll probably know that, as far as I'm concerned, this is the greatest English Bible translation of all time. And I think maybe few would even disagree with me on that, unless maybe you're Catholic or Orthodox or something like that. I think most people would agree that, with that statement. Um, a lot of people think that it's too hard to read, but I tend to disagree with that. I think that you can read it. It's not as easy to read and certainly will have problems if you just read it by itself without like any help. But anyone can really learn to read the King James Version. And if you do, then I think you'll get a lot of benefits, namely how beautiful sounding it is. It is the most beautiful translation to read out loud. It was designed to read out loud. And I think that the translators did a phenomenal job um, kind of designing it for that purpose. Um, it's the Protestant text, it's the traditional Protestant English Bible text. And so when I read it, it sounds like the Bible, it sounds like theology, it sounds like Christianity, it sounds like the Reformed tradition. And the Reformed English canon, you could say, um, is very compatible with the King James version because things like the Westminster Standards and the Puritans and a lot of the preaching that we love is using the same sort of language as the King James and is often based on the on this translation. So um, I'm going to put it into S tier because I still read it often and I still really appreciate it, and I think that if you want to, you should too. Um, Although I do think that, you should read it alongside a modern translation. Okay, the NKJV is, I think, really good. It uses the same underlying Greek, or similar anyway, underlying Greek, um, as the King James Version, uh, which is great because you get things like the benediction of the Lord's Prayer and other readings like that, which, a lot of modern scholarship says is not really authentic anymore. We've found evidence that suggests that it's a later accretion. But nonetheless, for centuries and centuries, Christians had been reading the benediction of the Lord's Prayer, for thine is the kingdom, the power, the glory forever. Amen. And it is included in the NKJV, which is something that a lot of people really appreciate. The NKJV flows and kind of has that King James Version feel, but doesn't have archaic words. It's very easy to understand, very beautiful read out loud. I think it's excellent. I actually really like it. It's one of my favorites, actually. Even though I would prefer a more critical text translation like the ESV or the NRSV or something like that, I do think the NKJV is a great option. Okay, the LSB is a newer translation. I don't know much about it. I think it's more of a formal equivalent translation or a literal translation. I have not really read it myself, to be quite honest with you, so I don't really have much of an opinion. I will say that my dad likes it, and because my dad likes it, I will put it into C tier. The NASB. The NASB is a translation I can see myself using. I really can. In fact, I do use it from time to time just when I'm trying to compare. Sometimes for fun, I just go on my YouVersion app and I just start reading a passage that has kind of captured me, and I start reading it in different translations just to kind of see which ones I like it more in. And Sometimes I like the NASB, sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's kind of awkward, especially in the 95 version, in my opinion. I think that it renders English sentences, I think it renders Greek and Hebrew into English sentences that feel like unnatural English. And I think you get that with a more literal translation sometimes, but somehow, you know, translation like the King James or the ESV have been able to uh, do a literal translation while still having very good flowing English. And I think that the NASB sort of falls short in that way. So the 95 I'm going to put into C tier. The 2020, they actually smoothed over some of those things. It's still a little bit awkward sounding to me when you read it out loud, but overall, I think it's a little bit better. I'm going to put it into B tier, which is controversial because a lot of people I would say that like the NASB prefer the 95. I don't. I prefer the 2020. The RSV is an older translation. I think it came out in the 1950s. It's kind of a standard bearer as far as modern critical Bible translations goes. Um, and it's actually kind of archaic in a way. It has this really cool feature where when addressing a divine person, it uses these, thous, and ye's, which is, I think, a cute feature. It's not like a reason to go and buy it. I don't think it's like a selling point, but I as someone who appreciates the traditional language, the nerdy theological words, and the KJV feel, that's something I like. So I like the RSV. Honestly, most people who are using the RSV these days, as far as I can tell, are like more traditional Catholics. But I do think it's a pretty decent translation. Although, if you're going to get a critical text translation, I would just get a newer one. But because of its importance, I am going to put it into B tier. Okay, the ESV. I love the ESV. I've tried to be too cool for the ESV. I really have, because there's a stigma around it that it's like the Reformed Baptist translation, or it's the Bro translation, or the Theo Bro translation, which is true. Okay, a lot of the people who use the King James, a lot of the people who use the ESV are like tattoo having, beard growing, whiskey drinking, Reformed Forum using people. But when you open up the translation and read it, it has that King James feel. It's got that traditional feel. It's based on the most modern critical text version of the New Testament and the Masoretic Hebrew text. It's a very good translation. It's a beautiful translation. The Psalms and the ESV, they did a wonderful job. Um, Designed to be read out loud in churches, which it's excellent for. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Really a big fan of the ESV. Not only that, but the ESV, more than maybe any other translation on this list, has really nice physical copies. Like Crossway, the publisher of the ESV, does a really nice job of making sure that basically at every price range, there's a beautiful version of the ESV. If you have $20, you can go out and get yourself an ESV Thin Line, which is a classic that no one should be ashamed to have. But if you have a little bit more money, maybe if you're a dentist or a lawyer, you can go out and get yourself a $250 heirloom or something like that. Or maybe if you don't have the money and you buy it anyway, like me. Okay, that's a discussion for a different day. But the ESV, I'm going to put it into A tier because I do really like it. Is a more evangelical translation, but it's probably the best evangelical translation you can get right now. That's from a critical text perspective. The CSB, I don't like the CSB. Okay, I don't want to make anyone mad, but I think the CSB is kind of bad, and it's not a translational thing. It's not like an underlying text thing. It's just a critical text translation. As far as I could tell, it's an accurate translation. It's the English. The CSB does not have good English, in my opinion. I think it lacks beauty, and maybe some people don't care about that, or maybe you disagree. I'm not saying you shouldn't use it, but when I read it, I think it sounds awkward. Actually, let me read you Psalm 1 from the CSB. I was reading this earlier, and I just thought this was so weird. This rendering, and it's all over the place, but this is just a good example. Ready? How happy is the one who does not walk in the advice of the wicked, or stand in the pathway with sinners. That phrase, walk in the advice of the wicked, it's not that it's hard to understand, it's just not how people talk. And so it's like, it's a formal, or it's a dynamic equivalent translation made to be easy to read, made to be more, you know, a smooth form of English. And all over the place, they do stuff like that. Or they force um, readability, or they force modern language into it. And I got to say, I really don't think that to be an easy to read translation, you need to dumb it down. I really don't think that. In fact, I'm going to talk about the NIV in a second. I don't think the NIV dumbs down English. I think it just uses a simple form of English. The sentences are a natural length. They use still big words, but you know what? Anyone with like maybe a sixth to eighth grade reading level can read the NIV pretty easily. The CSB, I think it's just ugly. I think it's just an ugly sounding translation. And just like to give you a little perspective, let me read the NIV in the same verse. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take. I just think that that's a smoother, more natural sounding English. I think the CSB really falls flat, such that even though I've read it a lot, I actually, my main Bible was a CSB. When I sit down and read it, I just have a hard time with it. I can't get behind it. If you like it, I'm glad you like it, because Holman, the publisher of the CSB, does a really nice job, like Crossway, putting out really beautiful editions. And they have like nice premium goatskin editions for like a really affordable price, like half the price of like a usual premium edition. So that is a benefit of the CSB. I am going to put it in C tier though, because I think it's accurate. I just don't like the style of it, I guess. Okay, the NRSV. The NRSV is the standard in mainline churches and in seminaries and in university religious studies, which I think is a good thing. You know, it's good to have a standard, kind of like what the KJV was for 200-300 years. Um, the NRSV replaced the RSV as like the standard academic text. The NRSV is beautiful. It's made to be read out loud in churches. It's made to be an ecclesiastical text. It's also very exact because it is an academic translation. I think it came out in the 80s. As far as I'm concerned, the NRSV is probably the best translation that is available right now. So take that for what it's worth. People don't like the NRSV because it uses inclusive language, and it does kind of take it a little too far, where it's like, okay, obviously this is addressing men, but you're saying brothers and sisters. It's like, that's a little too overboard. But they say that the ESV does it better. But here's the thing. The ESV doesn't do it better. They just take it to the other extreme, where it's like, okay, Paul is addressing the whole church, but it still refuses to say brothers and sisters. It's like, it makes sense in modern English to say brothers and sisters, because if I was addressing a whole church, I wouldn't say brothers anymore, because we live in a more egalitarian society. So that's not how people talk. So I think that something in between the NRSV and ESV would be better. I think the NRSV has a slight edge on the ESV because of pedigree. But that being said, the ESV is vastly superior to the NRSV in availability. The editions that you can get are way better. It's extremely difficult to find a decent NRSV that's aesthetically pleasing, has a nice layout, and, you know, in a nice binding. But that being said, I think it's a superior translation. The NRSV updated edition is crap. Don't use it. It kind of forces fringe modernist scholarship that no one really takes seriously for like a liberal agenda. And there's no way to spin. I've tried to like it. I've tried to like think about it more charitably than that, but it's just is what it is. I can do another video on that if you want, but I just would avoid the updated edition until maybe one day they'll update it and take that stuff out. But right now it's just bad. The NIV, as far as I can tell, as far as I'm concerned, is the best dynamic equivalent translation or thought for translation on the market. It does not have the same issue as the CSB. I'm going to put it in A tier. It doesn't have the same situation that the CSB gets you in, where it's like, to make it easier, they dumb it down and they give you a bad English. The NIV has a good English. It kind of reminds me of reading C.S. Lewis, where C.S. Lewis is easy to read, but it's a very beautiful English. So that's the way I see the NIV. It's like what the CSB should be, in my opinion, which is the opposite of what usually people think, but that's okay. The Net Bible I've never read, but it is cool that they have a full notes edition. Basically, what happened was the translators made a kind of study Bible where they have every single note that they had made for the translation process, which sounds very insightful, and I probably will at some point buy a copy. I'm going to put it into C tier because I know nothing about the translation, although I have heard that it's not like, it's kind of a mid translation. It's not like that good, but it is cool, like for scholarly purposes, to have the full notes. The NLT for me is something in between the NIV and CSB. It doesn't take itself as serious as the NIV. It's not as nice and as smooth and beautiful of an English as the NIV, but it's not as like ridiculous as the CSB. So it's something in between. I do like the NLT. I put it into B tier. The Message is not a serious option for a translation. If you know how to use it, it can be okay, but I don't really recommend it as like a translation. Like, it certainly shouldn't be your main Bible. The Amplified Bible, if I'm getting this right, I might be mixing it up with something else, but I think what they did was took the they took the underlying Greek and Hebrew and they tried to like expand the English for every word. It's very weird to read. It's very gimmicky, and I don't think it's like that serious. But that, I'm not saying it's bad. I don't know enough about it to say it's bad, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Okay, so that's my tier list. Let me know how you disagree or don't, or let me know how you agree or disagree. And my comment section is open for business. Go ahead, have fun, have a good one.